So you've been talking a lot about Mad Men.
Well, people have been asking to talk to me about Mad Men more than ever before.
It's the last gasp, and I think we're all a little sad about it.
Oh, that's good.
But where are you in your sadness?
I don't know if that's really the condition that I'm in. You know, it's a third of my life. I wrote the script 14 years ago. It took 7 years to get it made, and it's been an idea that I've had for a long time. So there's like this graduation sort of culmination part of it that's more of like, I don't know how to describe it. Part of it is I haven't had a lot of time to process it. I know that when the last episode airs, that's where I will have some emotion. And I had some emotion when I left my office after 7 years. That was interesting. That was a kind of you always talk about what's real in life and it's the things that you see through your own eyes versus other people's eyes, and that was like unavoidably I was in the moment leaving my office.
Well, when I went to the Red and Black Ball,
Right.
which was an interesting evening, what was really moving to me in a way was having all of the people who worked on the show up there on the stage. And it made me think about the craftspeople, the extraordinary costume designer, the extraordinary set designer, everybody that you had helping you with this.
By the time we're at the end of the show, there is nobody there who is not, as far as I'm concerned, both talented and a good human being. We had a kind of a policy from the beginning of the show, maybe because I had worked my way up in television and had experienced the below the line, above the line, the exclusivity, the actors being the only important people sometimes, and I just said there's no cool kids, and because of that, I think that I was always accessible. I never left the show. There was no one held back their opinions, which was really helpful, believe it or not, even though I'm thin-skinned and it's like, unpleasant to hear criticism. It was so good for the show to know that if I'm there on a Saturday and LaDonna was in accounting, that I could go and run a story by her. So that integration of everybody into every aspect of the show, and the fact that everybody read the scripts and people knew what was going on, and the crew was not like just dealing with it. Wasn't a job. It wasn't just a job to everybody. It mattered, and part of that is longevity. Like, how many jobs in Hollywood can you have for 7 years? We had like 80% of the people who started the show on the show at the end, even with all those delays and all the time off and everything. People like made time to come back. And the other thing I have to say, and I got this really, the Sopranos had done this on their finale, which is to, it's not just a matter of guilt, but how great to have that party. I mean, yes, the premiere is a promotion for the show, and that's why so many other people are invited, but traditionally that's what it is. But to have that party, and the only people who were not there were the people who were working. Everybody was invited. There was no line. And to be there and see everybody get dressed up and everybody sort of celebrating and everybody getting to enjoy what is sometimes an exclusivity, an exclusive event, it made it really a really special party. And my gratitude to those people is at the top of the list. But I hope that the audience knows at this point we've gone out of our way, partially because journalists have been interested, but we've gone out of our way to share as much of the attention as is possible. The audience has a desire to assign all work to some kind of author, and there is it's a lot of people making up the story.
Well, this is part of what I wanted to talk about today. This definitely came from you, though, and it was something you were obsessed with for a long time before you even showed that first script to David Chase,
Yes.
which started your ability to work at The Sopranos.
Yes.
Can you go back and remember what was really the initial impulse? It was to figure out, and we talked about this once before too, to figure out that character, that Don Draper character, as someone who represents our parents.
No, I don't know if that's true, that it was about parents at all. there's I've been asked the question, and I have to say, like, it's a flight of imagination on some level, that where decisions were made one at a time. It's just like looking at the whole series. People are like, what was the series about? It's 92 hours. It was about a lot of different things at a lot of different times. We didn't know that it was going to go on that long, and every episode had the same pressure to succeed or to tell a story that we hadn't told before. When I first started writing the movie, that I think intellectually became the impetus for I don't know if you're aware of this, but I actually in 1992 wrote 80 pages of a feature. It took longer than just 1992, but 80 pages of it because I kind of crapped out on it, and also because I got a job in TV. But I was writing this movie that was kind of looking at the 20th century and the men in particular who ran the 20th century and their inauspicious backgrounds and the malleability of their identity and their class mobility and their cultural mobility and their status as outsiders, even though they became power brokers. And I had all these biographies to work off of. I love the movie Little Big Man. I love Garp, which I never read the book of Little Big Man, but I did read Garp. And just the idea of telling a sort of picaresque story about the United States, about someone who is on a tangent to be very important, but is, you read these biographies, and I've mentioned them before, of Sam Walton and Lee Iacocca and Bill Clinton, the ratio of in
poverty-stricken.
Exactly, and they always lie about their childhood because they're from either some kind of poverty, often rural poverty, that they don't want. John Rockefeller, they don't want to be associated with that. On the other hand, they're kind of permanent outsiders to the George Bush family, the WASP elite, and they and the Roosevelts. You know what I mean? Let's not even make it political. To the white power elite that is born to it, and they kind of never lose it. That's how you end up with me paying so much attention to Conrad Hilton. He's another one of these people. A lot of these businesses that were actually the clients, like H.J. Heinz, and I'm trying to think of the other ones, but there's often a story about these leaders of these important, commercial or political, whatever they are. So really, that's like an intellectual version of it. The emotional version of it is I was, so I abandoned that thing, and about 5 years later, when I was 35, I wrote Mad Men and did not realize that they were related to each other at all. Until I went back to AMC was interested in it and asked me what the rest of the story was, and looking for my notes on Mad Men, I couldn't find anything, but I found the script, and the last page in the script was Ossining, 1960, and I was like, well, that's that guy. I knew that he would go into advertising. I knew that would be part of it. And honestly, the personal part of it is having a desire to tell a story in a different way. I was very interested in the way movies were at that time. I didn't like them.
Yeah.
And I was very interested in the passage of time, in adulthood, in my own... By the time I wrote Mad Men, I was a successful TV writer, and I was still basically unsatisfied in some way, and I was like, what is that about? Oh, all I have to do is read A Man in Full and say it's about everybody. It's like this for everybody, male and female. So that's the origins of it. Now, when you get into making the story and just, talk about giving credit, the writer's room comes in, and you have all these adults from different backgrounds.
What's the male-female component there?
It's varied. I mean...
From year to year.
From year to year. There have been times when it's... I don't hire people based on anything except for their writing samples, and then I meet them and I'm like, can I stand your personality for this long? And honestly, it comes down to the draft. A lot of times you'll see people who have one script on the show, and it's like that was their audition and it didn't work out. It doesn't mean they can't write, they just couldn't write the show. But I'd say it's definitely always been more than 50% women. So I know no one's written a story about that, probably because I'm not a woman, but
the women are so strong on the show.
I have to say, I don't believe that who you are influences at all what you can write. the only thing that's probably differentiated me is that I believe every character should have a story, and I don't like characters who just are there to serve other characters. So when you do that, the women become characters. When I focused in the second episode on Betty Draper, it's not like AMC wasn't interested in Peggy or Joan in some way. Joan was ancillary, actually, on some level.
At the beginning, she
Yes,
was.
they were interested in Peggy, but when I started paying attention to Betty Draper, they were like, no one cares about this. And I said, well, he's cheating on his wife, and don't you want to know what that story is? And they're like, we like the business story, because they'd only seen the pilot, and she's only in the last few minutes, and it's just a twist. But I feel the same way about the kids. I mean, I didn't have to hire a little kid to give Sally a sense of personality, you know, but I didn't want them, Sally or Bobby, to just be these, you know, instruments of you know, well, what do we do about the kids, you know, or whatever, or, you know, hey, Daddy, why are you sleeping with that woman? We never wanted to do that. We wanted them to have their own story. So if you commit to that, which is, I don't know why people don't most of the time. It's so much easier. It makes your job easier to just have those other stories. But then you also, the audience's interests were kind of not really on my mind. I sort of took as you have to when you're a storyteller, a slightly paternalistic view that you are telling them the story and they'll either like it or they won't, you know.
To what extent did the casting and the contributions from the cast over the years shift the direction that those characters went? Can you quantify that?
No. I mean, it's a weird thing to me. I have so much respect for them, and we created these characters together because, I mean, the minute John Hamm was cast, I had a totally different, you know, Don Draper to me in my mind when I write, Don Draper in my mind was a, you know, kind of a slightly, you know, was more of a feeling than something that I saw. I imagined, you know, James Garner or William Holden, but I never knew who he was. Once he was there and I saw what John was doing with him, that became the character. On the other hand, when people interview the actors, and they're always so great about it, and ask them, why did your character do that? I mean, it's written on a piece of paper, that's why. You know what I mean? It's like, and they know that, and we know that, and I have as little to do with what they look like and how they act and their temperament as they have to do with what happens to them.
In Hamm's case, he had a darker background to draw on as far as what he had to deal with in his personal life.
What exactly
in terms
you're
of
talking about?
you know, the deaths of his parents and,
Yeah, well,
and what he had to cope with.
I don't know if I've told this story before, but I intuitively sensed that in casting, actually. I actually said it when he walked out of the room the first time I met him, that I said that guy was not raised by his parents. I could feel it, because he also, quite honestly, this is another like blanket generalization that sounds really dumb, but casting is very intuitive and almost like mysterious sometimes. But making snap judgments and assumptions like that is usually you're attuned to human beings, especially in that moment. It doesn't last all the time in life, but it definitely lasts in the casting thing, especially if you've gotten over your insecurities about the material. And that is these people's emotional availability is why they get cast. And someone like John, who has whatever qualities he has, the existence of a conscience. I mean, how can you explain it that you can take the most beautiful person, male or female in the world, and put them on camera, and sometimes they're invisible. You know, these human beings have an extra thing that you can get very lucky and find or not find. But I mean, John in particular, part of my logic on it was that he did not behave like a man who was that good looking. And I felt like that was because he probably didn't know for a long time. And that was how that logic worked for me in my heart, because he's He is confident, but there was a little air of bravado to it, which I loved. You know, the whole thing about all we had was the pilot, but his whole conversation with Rachel Menken when he, like, you know, gives his philosophy of life and you know, his existential rap, and she just sort of looks at him and says, "I don't know if that's true," you know, and or he says, "I don't know if that's true," but she basically calls him on it. His like ability to show the moment of insecurity, the tell. You can't just get everybody to do that, and it's not. And you know, this is my analysis of it. For them, it's their profession. They'll probably just say it's acting. But the really, really good ones are very intelligent. I mean, very intelligent. Like their understanding is that it's the same as, certainly the same as the people who are making up the script. Their intelligence about what is going on in the story, and meaning for them is like a physical thing at a certain point. And besides the fact that there's a lot of hard work, there's a lot of practicing and rehearsal and things like that.
So I understand that there's one read for each show, and that's when all the work gets done in terms of feedback, and there's no rehearsal?
We don't have a lot of time. There's a table read. Again, talking about my accessibility, you know, even before, I didn't have a smartphone for the first couple seasons of the show, but so people would just show up or call me in the office, or I would be on set, I'd be around, you know. It wasn't, I didn't want it to be a thing where I showed up and it was like the social workers here and nobody behaved properly. So I was there as much as I could, so it wouldn't, I mean, it's still intimidating, I think, on some level. A lot of times you're like, well, what's wrong, why is he here? But you want to be there enough. But they didn't have a lot of time to rehearse. Certain people they work on their own. I don't know who they're running their lines with. I know people, for example, like Vincent and Allison Brie, Pete and Trudy, they would work on their own a lot to figure out what they were doing. And some of it's intuitive, but you sort of do a rehearsal and do another rehearsal and make some comments, and then you work as you're shooting, and we only have time to do 2 or 3 takes. So you do different sizes, you know, you move the camera around, but I would give a response. You hear how long-winded I am. You know, I don't know that my comments were always helpful. Their intuition was the best thing. The most interesting thing is I could never afford to reshoot anything. We reshot probably, in 92 hours, we probably reshot 20 scenes.
Which means that the casting really was an enormous deal.
Casting is everything.
Because they really came through.
Casting is everything.
And they matured, all of them.
They matured.
Christina Hendricks, where she is today, where she was when you started. Peggy Olson.
The characters matured, or the actors
the
matured?
actors as well.
I mean, it's great.
It's
no one matured more than Kiernan. And in terms of like, I don't want to be patronizing and suggest that people were not where they were. One of the great things about working at AMC for no money was that we were able to cast the best actors. There was no headline quality to it, and all of these people had very, very long resumes when they came to work on the show. They may not have played leads, but all of them had deals and had been working for a very long time. Sort of invisibly in a way, and when you have that experience of showing up on a set for one day of work, and you can do that a few times, that's the most terrifying thing in the world. You have a confidence about what you're doing. You know what, also, they were well suited to the parts, and did the parts become more suited to them? Probably. You know, I would never, ever...
Well, Christina wasn't initially going to be the longer...
Yes, but when I made her a series regular right after we cast her.
Oh, you did?
Before
okay.
we went to series, yeah.
Okay.
That's why her manager dropped her. She made a big... It was a supporting part that I just thought would be there once in a while, and as soon as I saw her audition, I started thinking about, well, what if this happens? Who's Peggy going to talk to in the office? This woman's really good. I gotta lock her down, and that's what happened. You know, we locked January down to play Betty Draper with, like, you know, one scene that was not in the pilot that I wrote just for her, just to see who could do it, and 5 minutes of screen time. Not even really. Like it's probably 2 minutes of screen time.
Wow.
It's a gamble.
So
And it doesn't always work, by the way.
So the relationship between Don and Peggy is one of the most fascinating dynamics in the whole show, and the most difficult to identify and explain, I think.
I like that. I actually, despite the amount of writing that goes on about the show, I think 85% of the show is difficult to write about and explain. And that means that it's hitting people in a different place. But
because the sexual dynamics, of course, with the women.
It's because people watch TV. It's not because of real life. Right? It's only because of TV. It's because you're wondering, like, well, how does this fit into the story I already know? But it's not. You're not looking in the right place. You're looking at your TV set and the movies instead of looking at your life. You know, there was someone asked me a question about the premiere this year, talking about, like, well, can't these people be happy? And isn't there happiness? And I was like, first of all, I understand you want good things to happen for your characters, but you do know that you would not watch the show if there was no conflict. I'm positive of that. Second of all, that first episode, to me, is not about cosmic forces contributing to our unhappiness or a statement on existence. It's about the fact that most people have opportunities and choose not to take them and don't even know that they're choosing. They talk about, you know, Ken Cosgrove's character will probably be telling his grandkids how he always wanted to be a writer, but it just didn't work out because he had to support the family, blah, blah, blah. And we saw him make that choice.
Right.
You know, Peggy's gonna, you know, who knows, Peggy's complaining that she can't find the right man. We saw the right man, right? So that's the kind of thing where you're like, you're not looking in the right place. So in terms of a TV show, maybe Don and Peggy's relationship seems strange, but the fact that they are both attractive people who have so much in common and have had their relationship be mother, father, sister, brother, you know, wife, child.
I never wanted them to be romantic, ever. Not me.
Well, some people.
No.
Some people want
You
that.
misread me there.
Okay.
But it's fun to parse.
Yeah.
It's fun to figure out.
Oh, I love that people.
Because
all this whole conversation.
The
don't think I don't
mentor-protege,
enjoy
the sex-free,
Yeah.
the real affection. It's so important that it not be.
And he has been. Just because they're not romantically involved doesn't mean he's not jealous of people loving her.
Right.
You know, Ted was that was threatening to him that she would be girlish. The same way, you know, look at Pete Campbell. What are his feelings towards her? He fell in love with her and then had his heart broken. I mean, he could have her, but he didn't want anybody else to have her. At the same time, he's had to learn to work alongside her. And at a certain point, you're like, well, what is their relationship at this point? How weird that they know each other this long and that they slept together that long ago and that they had a child together.
I know. I was
And
thinking about that. Where's that child?
That child is gone. That child is, well, you know, that's all I can tell you. We've made it very clear that it's not in either of their lives.
So I know this is so frustrating because you do talk a long time and I have all these questions.
Oh, go ahead. I'll be briefer.
But you have lunch to eat,
That's okay.
and I feel bad.
I don't want to eat on camera. I'm going to be briefer.
So the all right. So you
go ahead.
I
promise I will be more concise.
Eat your lunch.
I will be more concise too.
Eat it. Yeah.
I apologize.
So there was this long question of what was the final image that you had in your mind that you always knew where it was going to end. Is that image? You've shot it now.
It's in the show.
It's in the show. It is the same one, the one you always had.
Yeah, and it's more, you know. It's so funny. I'm actually kind of, you know, I don't know why people want to know if I knew it or not, because I could just lie.
You wouldn't.
Know? I wouldn't, but I mean, yeah, it's.
You could always change your mind. You could change your mind.
I didn't change my mind, and me not changing my mind is the product of having a lot of smart people. I do change my mind all the time, but
or you
I've
could
avoided
decide
a
it
lot
wasn't
of
good
dumb
enough,
stuff.
or it didn't work.
I thought it was right, and when I would tell people, they would get the feeling that I wanted, and so we'll see, you know. But it is what I thought it was. How it happens is was something that came later.
All right. And then the other question I have is that you are free now to return to the silence of your lonely room. You did make a movie,
Yes.
which we saw up in Toronto. We talked about. But what's in your future? What are you thinking about? Have you got a lot of things bubbling up now?
I'm working on a bunch of things. Yeah. Part of it has been, I'm a few months ahead of everybody else in terms of what the world has. Part of it's just been recharging, filling the tank, just sort of like being at rest.
I imagine.
And everybody's
and you have
kind
a
of,
family.
And I have a family, but I was part of my family during the show, just more the way they liked it, I think. Now I'm really there a lot. No, it's been incredible to sort of. This is someone else's image. I think Carlton Cuse said this to me, but he said it's like you get in the car and you turn the key and you'd left the radio on really loud, and all of a sudden life sort of comes back at you. So I feel that, but creatively it's kind of exciting because on the one hand, hopefully there's goodwill out there that changes things. Although I do think that the thing that people will really, when they say you can do whatever you want, they really will pay you to do what you just did. So for me, I get to actually think about what I want to do.
And you have that freedom.
And yes, and I am always interested in the audience, about like what is the story that I want to tell to other people. Because for me, it's never what I want comes out more when I'm making it than when I'm actually thinking of the idea. Something about the way Mad Men was I think this would be a great show to watch. I'd love to see this show. And then, and you're arguing with people who are telling you nobody's going to like it, so you kind of like, it's confusing because I watch TV and I know what I would like. And now I'm back in this thing where I'm like, what do I want to see? What do I want? What kind of adventure do I want to go on?
Well, I think the good news is that compared to where the world was when you started, there's a lot more flexibility out there. I would argue that there's a lot more room to play.
Not
so much in the movie world.
Yeah, I
the
don't know.
television world.
I don't know, and I wonder if the movie world is changing too. I think
hope
that as
so.
everyone gets used to what distribution is now, and it's very expensive to produce anything. The interesting thing about television is that you can kind of make a little bit of a bargain out of doing more than 2 hours, and that's with your cast, and you can get people over a longer period of time, and it's can be a more financially substantial property over time. So that whole model has been very good. The other thing that's been good is that the belief in the niche, which is that people making $1 billion on a show like Mad Men, more than $1 billion actually, that is internationally successful, but also really hitting a slice of the audience.
People thought it was slow. People thought it was kind
still
of
do.
pokey, and
They thought it was
pokey.
Oh, pokey! I thought
Yeah.
you said hokey. I
No,
was like,
no,
I never
no,
heard
no,
that
no,
one.
no, no.
I've heard,
No, no.
pokey. Oh, believe me, I heard it from John Feldheimer the first right before they renewed the first season.
The head of Lionsgate. Yeah.
Yes, he was like, it's really slow, and he's like, you need more scenes, and I'm like, do you know how hard it is to do more? Long scenes is how we save money. You know what I mean? It's really, if I want to have a car accident, 30 seconds of action, I need to have 7 pages of dialogue. I don't think it is slow, and I don't even think it's old-fashioned in that way. I think it's just...
I don't think it's slow.
It's different. It's different.
People wanted it, obviously.
Yeah. Well, yes.
And the other thing.
But I do understand. Believe me, when I have to, I'll tell you when I really notice it. When I'm asked to provide a clip for an award show or something, and I was like, 19 seconds. It's taking someone 30 seconds to answer the phone on this show.
But the other question I had, a businessy question, was how did you, in the end, looking back now, that awfully fraught period of time where you were bargaining and negotiating and fighting for what you wanted on the show. You didn't want them to cut it. You didn't want them to give you less time. At the time, you said it hurt the show. Do you feel it recovered?
the show did recover. I mean, what it really hurt was it hurt. First of all, it kind of ruined, despite all the fighting, a very ideal experience for a lot of us to feel completely unappreciated.
Mm-hmm.
And AMC's decision to move the show and keep it off the air for a year, which was independent of my negotiations. I've never been able to get that story out there. Nobody believes me. They all think it was because I was negotiating and I delayed it. They had already decided to move it. And people, they've admitted this and they've talked about it publicly, and people must know now that they see how they break up the seasons and all those other things, that this strategy, whether the fans like it or not, has been very, very good for them. And that it was an act of wisdom in some way. But to feel that you had...
Emotionally, it was destructive for you.
Emotionally, it was hard, and I was like, I don't want to go back to work on this magical experience and have to write about negotiating, because you're sensitive, and I didn't actually. It was really great. That's what Zuby Zoo was about. Was like, we're going to come back and we're going to do this story about this man's belief, in romantic belief in this marriage. It doesn't. Though his wife has other intentions, which is kind of what I thought was interesting about the story, that Megan is a modern person and her independence is where it goes wrong, not Don's boredom or another woman or anything. But, I mean, The Sopranos was off the air for 16 months and came back, and I was not worried on some level that AMC was doing that and what would happen. What I really wanted was to continue working, even in the struggle, without a public conversation of how much money I was making, despite how much money they were making. You know, we closed the deal, and AMC went public the next day. I have to say that I now operate in an environment where gratitude is expressed all the time towards the show from both of these companies.
Charlie was very worth it.
They're you know, and Lionsgate as well. You know, I had people over there saying, like, you know, you helped us buy Summit. You know, you made us a prestigious studio, and I enjoy all of that. But to be in the middle of it and to realize that, like, you know, it was a little bit disillusioning, and I think it might have turned the show from the underdog kind of niche thing that it is into suddenly making people think about it as a business. Not that it wasn't one. That's what I thought was. That was what I thought it was. We lived in an environment, winning all those Emmys, and despite whatever our audience size was, where it wasn't really discussed. It wasn't an issue. People were like, whatever, I like this show. I don't really care how many people are watching it or whatever. And all of a sudden, we were only being discussed in economic terms. And that's not my job. You know, it turned out it was my job, but it's not my job. And especially because it had brought such plenty to the players. That was the part where I was just like, what is this about? But, you know, I do think it recovered, and I do think that part of what was interesting about the experience, I only worked on the last 4.5 years of The Sopranos, right? So I only worked on the last 3 seasons. It's defined as 2. It was, once a show succeeds and ages and isn't the newest thing that there is, no matter what it is, you gotta keep your game up. And so for me, that meant taking as many risks as we always did. And sometimes, you know, you have somebody discover, I mean, thank God for Netflix so people could watch it from the beginning, but you'd have people discover the show and say to me, where's this been? I didn't even know about it. And then you have other people saying, like, I don't get it. I do not know what the big deal is. And you're like, I'm just one of the things on the landscape. You have many, many choices.
I went to that premiere. My 25-year-old daughter left my house on Sunday night to go to someone else's house to watch that premiere with her friend, with Ryan. Ryan and Nora had to see that premiere, and so they were furious with me for having watched it already. So that's something.
That's very nice to hear.
Thank you.
I have to say, just my gratitude towards the people who did watch it and were so evangelical about getting other people to watch it. In the back of your mind, your biggest hope is that people will get out of the entertainment you're making what you've gotten out of entertainment, which is the sensation that you're not alone. And when people tell me that watching the show, they tell me it's cathartic. They can tell me that they're talking to their grandma about it, or they're talking to the guys at work about it, or when they tell me that it made them feel less alone, then I'm like, that's why I'm here. That's all I ever wanted.